All right, get ready because today we are taking a deep dive into how to make millions before grandma dies. It's a Thai film, and I gotta say, that title really grabs your attention, doesn't it?
It definitely makes you wonder what you're getting into.
Yeah. So we've got the synopsis, a bunch of audience reviews, and the buzz is pretty interesting. There seems to be more to this film than meets the eye. We're on a mission to find out what's making it resonate so strongly with audiences.
What's really fascinating is that this seemingly lighthearted premise actually sets the stage for exploring some universal anxieties. Like, think about it, family dynamics, mortality, what we value in life. Those are all things that we grapple with whether we want to admit it or not.
Right. So to set the scene for those who haven't seen the film, we've got M, a university dropout, kind of stuck in a rut. He comes up with this, well, interesting plan when he finds out his grandmother, Mengju, is terminally ill.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, he decides to care for her, but his motives are, let's just say, not completely selfless. He's got his eyes on that inheritance.
So it's like a heartwarming heist.
Exactly. And that's where the humor comes in, right? You've got this character who's so focused on his own needs that he practically tricks and falls into genuine connection, almost accidentally. It's a classic comedy setup. But what elevates this film is how it uses that humor to explore some deeper, more universal themes.
It's like they're using humor as a gateway to something more profound.
Absolutely. It could have easily stayed as a surface-level comedy, but the film takes a step further. From what I'm seeing in these reviews, M's relationship with his grandmother actually undergoes a real transformation. It starts with these purely transactional motives, and then something shifts.
And this seems to be where the performances by Puthapong Asaratanakul as M and Usha Simkum as Meng Ju come in. Critics are praising their chemistry, their ability to make that transformation believable. It's not a sudden change of heart. It's a gradual process of M letting go of his cynicism and becoming vulnerable with his grandmother.
Which makes sense. It's like the film is setting us up to expect a simple, heartwarming story, but then peels back the layers and reveals something much more complex, much more nuanced.
Like an onion.
Kinda. And speaking of layers, let's talk about family dynamics. It's not just a story about M and his grandmother. There's a whole ensemble cast representing different generations, different viewpoints.
What's really interesting is how the film doesn't shy away from portraying those generational conflicts, right? You've got the workaholic Gen X mother, the wise grandmother, and the sort of lost Zoomer grandson.
Exactly. And each generation has its own set of values, priorities, even ways of seeing the world. And sure, those differences create friction, but they also create opportunities for growth and understanding.
It's like they're highlighting the challenges and the potential of those generational gaps.
Yeah, it's not just a feel-good story about a grandson learning to appreciate his grandma. It's also a commentary on the complexities of family relationships in a world where those generational divides seem more pronounced than ever. It makes you wonder, how does that play out in our own lives? Do those differences become insurmountable obstacles, or are there ways to bridge the gap and find common ground?
It's definitely a question worth exploring, and I'm curious to see how the film handles it. Does it offer a simplistic solution where everyone suddenly sees eye to eye? Or does it delve into that messy reality of navigating those differences in a way that feels authentic and relatable?
So we've got the humor, the heartwarming transformation, the generational clashes, but we can't ignore the elephant in the room, or rather, the elephant in the title. We've got how to make millions before grandma dies. Clearly, the theme of mortality is woven into this story.
And it's not just a plot device. The grandmother's terminal illness forces M, and by extension the audience, to confront the reality of death, the reality of limited time with loved ones. It's like a gentle nudge, reminding us to cherish those connections and make the most of the time we have.
It's also interesting that the film isn't afraid to explore the more difficult emotions that come with loss and grief. From what I'm gathering from the reviews, it seems to find that balance between those heavier moments and the lighter, more comedic aspects.
That's a tough balance to strike. It would be easy to go overboard with sentimentality or avoid the more difficult emotions completely. But this film seems to find that sweet spot, creating an experience that is both emotionally resonant and authentic without feeling manipulative or overly saccharine.
It's like walking a tightrope.
Yeah, and it looks like they're doing it gracefully.
And weaving it all together is this theme of love and legacy. One reviewer highlighted this line from the film, "Being the giver feels much better than being the receiver." It so perfectly captures the film's message about the true value of connection and the impact we have on each other.
It also circles back to that idea of inheritance, right? M starts out fixated on material wealth, but through his time with his grandmother, he discovers a completely different type of inheritance. It's one built on love, shared moments, the lessons we learn from those who came before us.
It makes you think about your own relationships and the kind of legacy you want to leave behind. It's not just about money or possessions. It's about the impact we have on those we love, the values we share, the stories we pass on.
It's about something much deeper and more enduring than material wealth.
Exactly. Which brings us to the heist aspect hinted at in the title. We know M starts with this scheme to make millions, but it sounds like the film is using that concept metaphorically.
Several reviewers pointed out that the real heist isn't about money at all. It's about the emotional riches M stumbles upon through his relationship with his grandmother. He's almost stealing moments of joy, connection, wisdom, things he wouldn't have found if he hadn't let go of his initial greed.
Such a clever play on words. It leads you to think you're going to get a typical heist narrative, but then reveals that the true treasure is something much more profound.
It's a brilliant way to subvert expectations and highlight the transformative power of love and human connection.
Right. M enters the story thinking like a thief, but in the end, he's the one who's robbed, in the best way possible. Robbed of his cynicism, his selfishness, his narrow view of success.
And that transformation seems to be the core of what makes the film so captivating. It's not just a heartwarming story. It's a story of growth, redemption, and the realization that true wealth lies in who we are and how we connect, not in what we own.
And that's a message that resonates universally, regardless of background or personal experience. It taps into that human need for connection, purpose, that sense of belonging.
It's a theme that transcends cultural boundaries.
So we talked about humor, heartwarming transformation, generational conflicts, the exploration of mortality, and the metaphorical heist. But what I find particularly compelling is the film's ability to make these profound statements without being preachy or overly sentimental.
Right, it avoids being heavy-handed.
Yes. It's a testament to the director's skill and the nuanced performances of the actors. They managed to convey these complex themes without hitting the audience over the head with them. It's more like they're inviting us to join them on this journey of discovery, allowing us to draw our own conclusions and connect with the story on a personal level.
Like they're trusting the audience's intelligence.
Exactly. We're not just passive observers, we're active participants in figuring out the meaning. That's what makes for truly engaging storytelling.
It's what sets this film apart from those predictable, formulaic stories that spell everything out for you. How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies trusts its audience to be smart, introspective, and to come away with their own unique interpretations of the story.
And speaking of unique interpretations, one detail that kept popping up in the reviews was the grandmother's desire for a proper burial. On the surface, it seems like a minor thing, but I have a feeling there's more to it than meets the eye.
It definitely stood out to me as well, and I think it's worth exploring further. It could reflect her cultural background, the significance of rituals surrounding death in Thai society.
Right. We know respect for elders and reverence for ancestors are deeply rooted in Thai culture. Her concern about her burial might not just be a personal preference. It could be a way of honoring her heritage, ensuring a peaceful transition.
But it could also have a more personal dimension. Maybe it points to her fear of being forgotten, even in death. The fact that she shares these worries with her grandson, who initially only wanted her money, adds another layer of complexity to their relationship.
It's like she's entrusting him with something much more valuable than her finances. She's opening up about her vulnerabilities, her deepest fears, her desire to be remembered and honored. It's a testament to the bond that develops between them, despite how different they are.
And it raises questions about what legacy really means. Is it about material inheritance, or is it about the intangible things we leave behind? Memories, values, the impact we have on others.
It's a theme that runs through the entire film, and it's clearly resonating with viewers. It's making me think about my own life, the things I want to be remembered for.
It's a powerful reminder that our impact extends far beyond our physical possessions.
It really is. And that brings us to a natural stopping point for this part of our deep dive. We've only just scratched the surface of how to make millions before grandma dies, but it's clear there's so much more to uncover.
We've got the groundwork laid, but there are still layers to peel back, themes to unravel.
Exactly. And we'll do just that in the next part of our exploration. But before we move on, I want to turn to you, the listener. Think about a time you watched a film that truly resonated with you. What was it about that story that moved you? What made it stick with you? Hold on to that thought, because we're going to dive deeper into the emotional impact of how to make millions before grandma dies in our next conversation.
It's going to be good. Welcome back to our deep dive into how to make millions before grandma dies. Last time we were talking about the grandmother's wish for a proper burial and all the different layers of meaning that might be packed into that seemingly simple detail.
Right, it's a perfect example of how the film uses these subtle details to explore complex ideas. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the visual language of the film. We touched on those lingering establishing shots earlier, and they really seem to jump out at reviewers. It's more than just showing off pretty scenery, it's about setting a specific mood and atmosphere.
Exactly. It's a very deliberate choice. Those long, drawn-out moments are inviting us to slow down, to see the world through the grandmother's eyes. Facing her own mortality, every detail, every little thing takes on a deeper meaning. It's such a clever way to visually reinforce the film's message about cherishing each moment.
It's like those filmmakers are saying, hey, slow down, look around, appreciate the beauty of this ordinary scene. It's a very intentional choice, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It would have been easy to go with a faster, more frantic editing style, but they choose to linger on these seemingly mundane moments. It forces us to confront the beauty and fragility of life, even in the everyday.
It's almost like a meditation, a visual reminder to be present and appreciate those small things that we so often take for granted.
You got it. And that deliberate pacing also gives the emotions space to breathe. We, the audience, have the time to connect with the characters, to feel the weight of what they're experiencing, and to really absorb those subtle nuances in their interactions.
Talking about those subtle nuances, a lot of reviewers also mentioned the effective use of close-ups, especially in those intimate scenes between M and his grandmother. It feels like those close-ups are so important for conveying the emotional depth of their bond.
I agree 100%. Through those close-ups, we get to witness that gradual shift in their relationship. You see the subtle changes in their expressions, that unspoken understanding that grows between them, and how their eyes reflect that burgeoning love and respect.
It goes beyond just their facial expressions too, right? The close-ups highlight the small gestures, a touch, a shared smile, a tear rolling down someone's cheek. They all speak volumes about how deep their connection is, all those unspoken emotions simmering beneath the surface.
It's like a reminder that the most powerful moments in a film are often the quietest. They rely on those tiny gestures and unspoken emotions to hit you with this depth of feeling that words just can't quite capture.
Okay, so we've got those long, lingering, establishing shots, setting the tone and creating that sense of contemplation. And then we have the close-ups that pull us into those intimate moments. What about the editing itself? How does the way the film is cut together contribute to the flow and pacing?
It seems like the editing is really intentional and deliberate, based on what I've read. It's not about flashy cuts or jarring transitions. Instead, it creates this really smooth flow that lets the story unfold naturally.
So more about enhancing the emotional impact than going for spectacle. And it sounds like that approach is working because people are praising the film for being genuinely moving without feeling manipulative or melodramatic.
It's walking that fine line, right? But they seem to have found the balance. They trust the audience to connect with the story in their own way, giving us space to feel those emotions without hitting us over the head with sentimentality.
Right, we've talked about those visual elements, the cinematography, the camera work, the editing. But let's talk about the other half of the equation, sound. What role does sound design play in how we experience this film?
You know, sound design often gets overlooked, but it's such a powerful tool for filmmakers. It sets the mood, enhances the emotional impact, and can even shape how we understand what we're seeing on screen.
One thing that really jumped out in the reviews was the piano-driven score. People described it as haunting, heartbreaking, perfectly calibrated to enhance the emotional beats. Sounds like the music is working hand in hand with the visuals to really draw you in.
Absolutely. The choice of a piano-driven score is really interesting, don't you think? The piano can evoke such a wide range of emotions, from melancholy and introspection to something really warm and tender. And in this film, it seems like they're using it to underscore the full spectrum of what those characters go through.
I can almost picture in my head those gentle, melancholic melodies during those quieter moments, the dramatic chords swelling up during intense moments of grief or tension, and maybe even some lighter, more playful notes in the comedic scenes.
You got it. And it's not just the melody either, it's the pacing and volume. Sometimes it swells, creating a sense of overwhelming emotion, and sometimes it fades into the background, letting the silence speak for itself.
And that silence can be as powerful as any musical note, can't it? It allows us to absorb the full weight of what we've just seen, to just sit with those emotions and reflect on the deeper meaning of the story.
Right, and that silence can also build anticipation or suspense, which makes the payoff even more powerful.
Filmmakers have a lot of tools, and using silence strategically can be just as effective as any sound when it comes to influencing how we feel as viewers.
It's all about creating that immersive experience that hits you on multiple levels.
Yeah.
And it seems like How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies is hitting all the right notes. It's not just something you watch, it's something you feel.
Exactly. And that's a testament to how skilled those filmmakers are, their ability to create this cohesive, immersive world that pulls you in and keeps you engaged from beginning to end. All right, so we've talked about the cinematography, the editing, the sound design, and the music. We're really starting to build a picture of what the director's vision is and how all those elements work together to create this unique cinematic experience.
And I think it's worth noting that it goes beyond just being technically brilliant. This film is emotionally resonant too. They've managed to balance style and substance, creating a movie that's both visually stunning and emotionally gripping.
It's not just a pretty picture, it's a story that really sticks with you.
For sure. And that brings me to a question I've been thinking about. We've covered how well made the film is, but what about the tone, the style of storytelling itself? How would you describe the director's approach?
I'd say it's a blend of realism and that subtle kind of humor. The performances feel genuine, the dialogue sounds natural, unscripted, and the whole tone is one of quiet contemplation and emotional honesty.
Right, it steers clear of that overblown melodrama and sentimentality. It's much more understated.
It feels grounded, even when exploring these big themes of love, loss, and meaning.
Like they're saying, this is life. With all its messiness, all its beauty, we're not going to sugarcoat it or shy away from the hard stuff.
And that honesty is so refreshing. It's a good reminder that those stories that connect with us most deeply are often the ones that reflect the real-world complexities and all.
Totally. Speaking of complexity, something else I find really fascinating is how the film delves into family dynamics. We've touched on those clashes between generations, but there's also this underlying tension between tradition and modernity that runs through the whole thing.
Great point. You see it in that contrast between the grandmother's wish for a traditional burial and her children's more modern, maybe even westernized outlook.
It's like they're showing that evolution of values across generations.
And it's more than just burial practices, right? It's about how each generation views family, responsibility, and that whole balancing act between pursuing your individual dreams and honoring those family obligations.
Such a relevant theme in today's world. Globalization and technology are constantly changing how we live and work and connect with each other. Makes you think about your own family and how those generational differences play out, right?
It does. It's always this ongoing negotiation, finding ways to honor the traditions that came before us while making room for new ways of thinking and being.
It's not always easy, that's for sure. But it seems like this film might be suggesting those differences can make us stronger, richer, rather than tearing us apart.
It's about recognizing that each generation brings something to the table, that by listening to each other's viewpoints, we can learn and grow.
And that brings us back to the idea of legacy, doesn't it? What we inherit isn't just material, it's also about values, traditions, the stories that get passed down.
Exactly. It's acknowledging that we're all part of a bigger story woven together by those who came before us and those who will come after.
And that each of us has a role to play in shaping that story, leaving our own mark and adding to that tapestry.
All right, so we've covered the technical aspects, the emotional depth, the family dynamics, and that message about legacy, but we haven't talked about the heart of it all, the actors themselves.
Oh, right. I mean, actors are the ones who truly breathe life into any story. And in a film like this, where so much relies on the characters feeling real, those performances have to be top-notch.
From everything I've read, it sounds like the lead actors, Puttapong Asaratanako playing M and Usha Simkum as Mengju, deliver amazing performances. Reviewers are praising their chemistry, their ability to express a whole range of emotions, and how they bring those characters to life so authentically.
It's especially impressive considering that this is actually Usha Simkum's acting debut, and she's 78 years old. Goes to show that talent doesn't have an age limit, and sometimes the most powerful performances come from the most unexpected places.
It also says a lot about how good the director is at casting and at creating a space where those actors feel comfortable enough to be vulnerable, to explore that full emotional range of their characters.
It's obvious that everyone involved in this film really cared about telling this story and giving these characters the respect they deserve. And that passion comes through in every scene.
It sounds like a masterclass in filmmaking, a perfect blend of technical skill, emotional depth, and just incredible performances. I'm starting to understand why this film is resonating with people so strongly.
It's a film that speaks to that shared human experience, our desire for connection, for meaning, for a sense of belonging.
It's the kind of film that makes you laugh, cry, and then reflect on your own life and relationships. It's a film that reminds you to cherish the little things and appreciate the beauty in the everyday.
Sometimes that's all it takes, a story that brings you back to what really matters. But before we wrap up this part, let's turn back to you, the listener. Think about a time you watched a film that really stuck with you, maybe even changed how you looked at something. Those are the kinds of films that really stay with us, the ones that get under our skin and make us think differently about the world. But we'll delve into that in the next part of our deep dive, exploring how this film lingers in our minds and the impact it has on us long after the credits roll.
And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into how to make millions before grandma dies. We've covered a lot of ground, from the plot and characters to the filmmaking techniques and those subtle details that make this film so much more than just a heartwarming story.
And one of those details that keeps coming back to me is the grandmother's insistence on having a proper burial. Seems like a small thing on the surface, but it's clearly loaded with deeper meaning.
Yeah, it's a thread that's been running through our whole conversation, hasn't it? We've talked about it in terms of cultural significance, personal anxieties, even the concept of legacy. But I think it also taps into something more fundamental, how we grapple with the idea of making our mark on the world.
That's a really interesting thought. It's like she's saying, even after I'm gone, I want to be remembered. I want my life to have had meaning. It makes you wonder if that's a universal desire, that need to leave a lasting impact.
It's definitely something we all seem to crave, that knowledge that our lives mattered, that we made a difference, even if it's just to a few people. But this film really challenges us to think about what actually constitutes a legacy.
You're right. It goes beyond just money or fame. It's about the connections we make, the love we share, the impact we have on those around us. Sometimes it's even about those small, seemingly insignificant moments that make up a life.
Like those lingering shots of everyday life we talked about earlier. The way the camera focuses on the grandmother's hands as she cooks, or the sunlight filtering through the trees as she sits on the porch. Those moments are so full of beauty and meaning precisely because they're fleeting.
It's almost as if the film is whispering, pay attention. These moments are precious. This is what life is really about.
And it seems like that message is hitting home with audiences. The reviews are full of people talking about how this film made them want to appreciate their own families more, savor the present moment, and maybe even rethink what's truly important in their lives.
It really shows you how powerful storytelling can be. It's not just about entertainment. It can inspire, it can make us reflect, it can even lead to a shift in perspective. How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies isn't just something you watch passively. It's a catalyst for deeper thought, for conversations, maybe even for changing how you live your life.
It reminds me of M's journey throughout the film. He starts off with such a materialistic view of inheritance, fixated on that financial gain. But through his relationship with his grandmother, he stumbles upon a different kind of wealth altogether.
It's like he inherits her wisdom, her resilience, her ability to love and forgive. He learns that real wealth isn't about what you own, but about who you are and how you connect with others. That transformation is so powerful, it makes you consider what kind of legacy we're leaving behind for the next generation.
That's a big question, isn't it? Are we passing down material possessions, or are we sharing our values, our stories, our experiences? Are we teaching them to chase after success, or are we guiding them to find meaning and purpose in the simple things?
That's a huge responsibility, and it's something we should all be thinking about, not just as individuals, but as a society. What kind of world are we creating for those who come after us? What are we prioritizing? What stories are we telling?
There's a lot to think about, but I think How to Make Millions Before Grandma Dies gives us a glimmer of hope. It reminds us that even in the face of loss and uncertainty, there's still beauty to be found, connections to be made, and legacies to be built.
And it all starts with those small acts of kindness, love, and compassion. The way we treat each other, the stories we share, the memories we make, those are the things that really count, the things that will continue to have an impact long after we're gone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question. What kind of legacy are you building? What stories will you leave behind? What impact will you have on the world?
Because ultimately, it's not about how much money we make or how much stuff we accumulate. It's about the love we give, the connections we make, and the difference we make in the lives of others.
And who knows, maybe someday someone will be sitting here, diving into your story, exploring your legacy, and finding inspiration in the life you lived. That's all for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.